Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 294 with Eric Wang from Turnitin. We're continuing our conversation from several months ago with the announcement of Turnitin Clarity. Now we are inaugurating the launch of the platform recently, so exploring a little bit more in depth about the platform, but I just really appreciate kind of the time and space to have what I think is a very important conversation about AI's kind of tangible impacts, and especially in teaching and learning. Obviously, the core kind of experience for students, every day in their classes. Really appreciate how Turnitin is embodying transparency and collaboration between faculty and students and helping to blaze the trail here for how there can be really responsible and intentional AI implementation within the classroom. So I appreciate you listening to this fantastic episode number 294 with Eric Wang. Well, I'm excited to have you on, Eric, bringing folks back onto the show from Turnitin to continue to talk about the great work that you all are doing. So we'll start as we always do. If you want to just briefly introduce yourself and your role at Turnitin, and if kind of want to cover your background of what led you to Turnitin. I know you've been there for a while, and then we'll get to our conversation focusing in on what's new with Turnitin Clarity.
Sure. Yeah, Dustin. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Eric Wang. I'm the Vice President of AI at Turnitin. It's hard to believe saying this, but I've been here almost 7 years. And, when I joined, AI was something that Turnitin, like many companies, was kind of figuring out what to do with, especially in terms of the value that it brings to the classroom. We want to do it thoughtfully and carefully and in collaboration with educators. So it was a journey. And obviously the last 2 or 3 years have been especially interesting in so many ways. Before that, I was also in education. I was at a company called Chegg. And so really on the student side, really helping to drive a lot of the data science as they transitioned from a company known for printing textbooks to student services. And then prior to that, I did, a decade in government work. Part of that was overlapping with my PhD. It's funny, actually. My PhD, sometimes I tell this story. So people sometimes ask how I got into the field. And I tell them, actually, it was because I wanted to watch basketball and not have a real job. After undergrad, I went to Duke to get a management degree. Started doing some research in this lab. Little did I know that lab was, my advisor was one of the founding sort of folks in modern AI. I had no idea what machine learning was at the time. I just thought, I get to get a little stipend and watch basketball here at Duke. I'll take it. So sort of fell backwards into the path of AI. It's been a real journey. And as I reflect back on that journey and some of the lucky breaks I've caught, including falling backwards into my degree, I think about the opportunities that education has given me. And that's sort of led to where I am today, why I feel really passionate about the work we do, and providing more opportunities to students everywhere. So it's probably longer than the answer you were looking for, but that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, it's all good stuff, and you covered a lot of ground, so I appreciate you sharing all that you did, because I think it kind of brings in, like, the heart of, like, why you do what you do, and then, like, how you kind of garnered the skill sets and sort of the knowledge and, the experience of working kind of, a variety of roles and organizations, kind of, data science and getting your degree and, all these other things. So it all sort of coalesces into this moment of being at Turnitin, being that VP of AI and, figuring out that strategy and everything, which I think kind of the the tip of the spear, sort of outwardly being Turnitin Clarity. And we spoke with Annie from your team back in March, live in person at South by Southwest EDU when you were kind of announcing Turnitin Clarity. So that was just a really cool opportunity, and I loved kind of how she was speaking about it, sort of strategically at that point. But as of the recording now, we're sort of fresh off of the launch of Turnitin Clarity, which is a really cool moment too to kind of commemorate here. So if you want to speak kind of like, what's kind of maybe new in the time since, a few months ago and we were kind of just announcing it and this sort of launch, like if you just kind of want to speak more, even just like, in case folks maybe didn't listen to that episode, yeah, they absolutely should. But, quick kind of elevator pitch of Turnitin Clarity, kind of what's maybe new for folks since kind of that initial announcement of like the features or things, but just whatever you'd want to share, we'll kind of sit here and hang out a little bit for our conversation. But yeah, just speak to me a little bit more about this moment for Turnitin Clarity.
Yeah, Turnitin Clarity. What an exciting moment. It's something I've thought about for 7 years since I've been here at Turnitin. Certainly not my idea, but the elevator pitch for Clarity goes something like this. Transparency is really at the heart of a good relationship between a teacher and a student. And that relationship is what underpins great learning. Trust, visibility, transparency. And what Clarity does is it's a window. It's a very transparent window that brings the teacher and the student together into a conversation around the creation process of work, right? Because ultimately, if you're a teacher, we're so used to grading the final product, but really critical thinking, growth, curiosity, making mistakes. Those are all things that actually happen in the process. And just taking a look at that final product, while very powerful, doesn't tell you the whole story. We've always known that. We've always known that, but it's also really hard to scale grading the process. Clarity is our first step in starting to move into that space, starting to say, well, what can the latest technologies that are available do to help us address that? So what is Clarity? On its surface, Clarity is a fairly lightweight document editor. Doesn't really look unfamiliar, and that's intentional. We want it to feel simple and familiar to students. On the side, there's a sidebar, and it has the now ubiquitous chatbot. Except the chatbot that's there, again, having a very familiar form factor, it's not exactly the same as what you'd find plastered to the side of, browsers or ChatGPT. It's a chatbot we've built to really facilitate critical thinking. It's got a lot of guardrails and a lot of instructions and a lot of tuning and evaluation to ensure that it's not going to sit around and do work for the student. It does, though, scaffold complex ideas, puts things together. It encourages curiosity and exploration, and intentionally tries to leave room for productive struggle and, sometimes productive failure, which we know are important parts of growth. So again, form factor, really familiar, but it's all these little details. And so what's been new since we talked about it in March? In March, we were busy putting together all of the frameworks to, under the hood, all the infrastructure to actually run Clarity. We've continued to fine tune it, especially on the AI side, adding specific AI-driven specific features around grammar and soon citations. And then, of course, continuing to tune and refine our AI assistant. We've also done a lot of work on the teacher side. So Clarity also has a teacher-facing side. And the teacher side really shows the teacher the story of the document. Right? And it's not so much a tool about peeping into what the student did. That's not the intent. The intent really is, can we talk about the journey the student took? What are the indications we can give to the teacher that says, this is how they walked here. This is where they struggled. This is where they interacted with the AI and unblocked themselves. And being able to facilitate that transparent conversation when the teacher wants it, because Clarity is an assignment type in Turnitin Feedback Studio, being able to facilitate that conversation between the student and the teacher, I think it's just going to open up new ways for instructors to give feedback, for students to connect, for students to sort of say, yeah, this is where I struggled. This process was great, or this process was hard. I got lost here, and let me show that to you, right? And being able to have the teacher say, I see exactly what happened. Yeah, let's talk about that. That's really unique. I'm excited to see all the myriad of ways that actually the students and teachers find to use clarity in ways that like maybe we hadn't even anticipated. It's we're learning along with everyone else. So that's clarity. And I'm so excited. It's such an important complement to the AI writing indicator work that we've been doing the past few years. It really, fills the space of AI in the classroom. The idea that AI isn't bad. Using AI is not cheating. Using AI is not inherently something we shouldn't be doing. In fact, we need to be doing it, but we should do it thoughtfully. We should do it transparently.
Yeah, and what I love about because I mean, yeah, that was so much at the core of when I was speaking with Annie a few months ago, that sort of transparency and the collaborative nature of things, and like that yeah, it seems like such a smart move to bring AI in versus trying to, because I think like what a lot of people are sort of grappling with is like, okay, I guess we need to now sort of like design around AI or something, like try to circumvent it because yeah, people are just going to use it to cheat or whatever else, or like, but this being a great pathway to yeah, kind of embrace it, bring it in, because I know for me it was like, okay, like this is sort of the method and the outcome. I mean, it's just I think like great learning opportunity, great opportunities and ways to sort of
Yeah.
facilitate the sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
interactions with the faculty and the students. But then like it is that idea of like you're enabling like building kind of responsible like AI literacy, like how you student should be utilizing this presumably, just at this moment. I think it
Yeah.
provides a good example to me in my head of like, this is how you could, foresee using it as you go out into the professional world, using this as an augment, a complement, a co-pilot, like all those sort of like that vernacular where like, you're not saying like, oh, I got to do this thing, like just do it for me. And I'm not even going to like check it or look
Exactly.
at
Yeah.
it or
Yeah.
whatever. So if you want to just expand a little bit more on that, of like that idea of like the transparency, the collaborative nature between faculty and students, and then like that sort of outcome of it, of like, what the student is gaining through having their assignment be kind of facilitated in this way.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think I'll start with that last bit and work backwards. I think I was just having a conversation with a good friend, Chris Ostra, who teaches English at UC Boulder. And he said something to me the other day, and it was just profound. I had to stop and just kind of think about it. And he said, if you really think about why we teach writing, we talked about, critical thinking and all the things we talk, original writing is really important, especially in today's day and age. But he said, that still feels kind of high level. He goes, writing teaches the courage to begin and it teaches the courage to end. How the ubiquitous human experience of looking at a blank page, either pencil in hand or blinking cursor, and saying, I'm going to put on this page something, but there's nothing here, right? So to create something from nothing. And then on the other end of it, to the courage to be able to say, okay, I'm complete on this thought. I can walk away. Different sort of wisdom, very much same sense of courage, both kind of representing this step off a cliff and seeing if you'll fly, right? And writing teaches us that. And that lesson, I think, is so much bigger than writing. It's if you think about, what it means to live a life of courage, what it means to evolve in a world that's changing faster than we can wrap our heads around, right? Like that to me is what great writing and original writing, the ability to take that step off the cliff and trust that you'll figure it out. So that's super high altitude. Let's bring it back. I mean, I think, what are we doing here? I think what clarity does is it makes that step, it scaffolds it for students because they're still learning to do it, right? So if you're looking at a blank screen, you're looking at a blank page on clarity and the cursor's blinking at you, you've got your assignment, you're not 100% alone. You have the ability to kind of go to the sidebar and say, I'm sort of stuck, but you can kind of type down some ideas and it'll riff with you. If you're blocked, it'll kind of recap what you've done, up to this point, point you in maybe some directions, say, try these things. I don't know if they'll work, but give them a try. Of course, there's, more basic help functions in there as well. But what does a student get out of it? What a student gets is the ability to practice this incredibly complex and important skill. And they get to do it knowing that as they're practicing, they don't have to worry about whether their teacher is going to say, "Hey, you used AI. No, I don't trust you." They're able to say, "I used AI," and the teacher can see it, and I'm going to get feedback from that, and I'm going to grow. Or maybe they don't use AI, which is also great, which is also cool. And the teacher might say, "That's great. That's actually, this assignment really is a place where I really wanted you to focus." Or it's a place where, you know what, I really did want you to use AI. I wanted you to practice some of these critical skills, right? So they suddenly get this stage to demonstrate what they can do. And it's a very honest stage. And it's a stage where they're not going to get booed off of it. It's a stage where they can step onto it with the confidence that, yeah, like where they are, what they can do is going to be evident to the instructor, and the conversations that flow from that are going to be really transparent and really honest. I think it's a tool that's really sorely needed. And in many ways, if you think about what we're doing, it wasn't possible without AI. Not just the AI assistant, but even on the teacher side, the teacher's going to look at this report, and on face value, you say, well, it's another report a teacher's got to look at to grade. They've got a million things going on, except we're also using AI to do summarization. So the teacher's going to get a TLDR. Of course, they can dive in and look at the data. That's all there. But they're going to get the high level overview of what happened, right? So they don't go into that exploration, or they go into that exploration already with a sense of what shape of things they expect to see. That type of work, we wouldn't have built this in an age where LLMs didn't exist, because it would be adding a huge amount of work for instructors. So in many ways, AI provided the catalyst for this moment, and it's also providing, in many ways, the solution.
All right, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. Forsyth Technical Community College was juggling siloed systems, fragmented data pipelines, and manual workflows across marketing, admissions, and CRM operations. Then they deployed Bolt Agents, Element 451's AI workforce platform. The result? These agents handled over 80% of student inquiries independently, saving 183,060 human minutes, and cutting call volumes by 14% within just 1 week of rollout. Curious what your AI teammates could look like? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. Yeah, I think it's just really refreshing. Yeah, that's like opportunity that this enables and unlocks, like you said, like that just maybe wouldn't really have been possible otherwise, of like, each assignment that you sort of, incorporate this into being this sort of like, kind of rehearsal or kind of learning lab in and of itself, of that idea that you can kind of like get coached on your steps in the process and being able to show your work is, I mean, even otherwise where it's like, yeah, you'd either have something that's kind of too cumbersome to even kind of like interface with, of like showing all the steps that somebody took to get to a final assignment, or you kind of have to like hopefully have a bunch of students who are reliable narrators of like, this is how I got to where it is and whatever, or they don't even submit it or whatever. So I think that idea that you can be like, kind of inviting, the sort of kind of commentary and feedback in a way that, hopefully like helps them just keep doing better kind of iteratively each time, knowing like, okay, this is like the path you took and maybe you can do this differently next time, whatever. Like, it's just like, it's a great opportunity of that sort of, like transparency and collaborative nature is something that I really like. The building the AI literacy. And I think that, like you said, I mean, we're obviously recording this very early in the era of Turnitin Clarity being out there. So we'll see kind of what people cook up and come up with. But I think, it's such an important sort of kind of way to sort of like start blazing a trail, towards something. And
Totally.
then, people will kind of iterate and sort of get creative from there. So I think it good on you for kind of putting this out there. And I think, just really excited to see kind of what comes of it. And I think as you're sort of like kind of analyzing all this and, kind of thinking on this, like, what else do you see like on the horizon when it comes to AI's role in teaching and learning? Because I think this is like a big, really important part of it, is that sort of like the day-to-day, the submitting each assignment, for each student, each class, like, it's this kind of small piece, but really important piece. And then sort of, scaling it and kind of seeing, across all students, all courses, all institutions, whatever, like this will be a really, I think, impactful and important piece of this, of AI's role in teaching and learning. So just your kind of point of view, your vantage point, what else are you seeing on the horizon when it comes to AI's role in teaching and learning?
I think one of my most fervent hopes is that we get to a world where there's more authentic assessments, more human interaction. And I think clarity is a really important step towards that, right? So if you think about what it does, we've always graded, or at least, in our learning careers, teachers have always graded the end product because that's what made sense. And we get feedback on the end product, and we have to sort of connect what the teacher told us to part of our process, because the process was kind of invisible. I mean, unless it was a multi-part assignment, which is always more work for the teacher, we sort of had to say, oh yeah, okay, they're telling me this thought doesn't really make sense, or maybe I kind of went off track here. Yeah, on Tuesday when I was sitting around writing my second draft, this is where that idea came from. Well, what happened? What mistake did I make? Right. And it's a lot of, effort to do that. And you don't always do it well. So being able for the teacher to come in and sit down with a student and say, hey, I looked at your process and I'm going to give you feedback across your entire process. It allows the student to just zoom in and say, yeah, okay, I get this specific area of improvement. Makes that feedback so much more impactful. So I'm hoping that AI removes a lot of the things that take up so much time that take away from those human interactions. So you hear that a lot from everyone. And of course, I think we're in that camp where we want to create more room for those human engagements. I think there's another bigger picture, and maybe this is kind of a contrarian view among AI leaders, but I'll kind of toss it out. And I really fervently believe this. We're in this age where you see all these layoffs happen across all the industries, and you hear business leaders say, we're going to automate everything. I actually think the pendulum is going to kind of swing back the other way, because I really believe that people are going to realize that ultimately the real value of AI, and I could spend an hour on a podcast just talking about this topic because it touches so many pieces, but I think the real value of AI, people are going to realize for organizations, whether you're measuring by revenue or impact or anything else, the real value of AI is in augmenting the critical thinking, the creativity, the problem-solving capability of people, right? It's not so much AI can just do work like a human, because the reality is, I think you're looking at AI that it can do work really fast. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't take vacations. I get all that. But, I tell tech leaders all the time, I'm like, okay, your AI can code, your AI agent can code 3 times faster than your best coder. Is your app going to be 3 times better because you have 3 times more code? That doesn't make any sense. That literally makes no sense. And you can lay people off, but at a certain point, you get to a floor. You can only go so far. Ultimately, I think the most forward-leaning business leaders, the most forward leaders in general, are going to realize, no, we got to grow the top line. You got to grow what you can achieve and the value you can bring to your collaborators, to your partners, to your customers, whatever. And that's an AI. That's AI broadly augmenting how everyone in your organization is working, is creating, is problem solving, right? People not reinventing the wheel because you might have an AI that's able to give more context. It's interesting. The idea of compound interest comes in here. I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I feel so passionate about this. Yeah. If AI, again, teaching how in a classroom, if we can teach students how to use AI to make every single decision, let's say, 0.1% better. Decisions compound, right? A good decision begets a good decision, begets a good decision. They chain together and they're dependent. If every single one of those was a tiny bit better, and you get that snowball rolling, it only takes 1,000 decisions chained together to be like 3 times better in terms of outcome, whatever that outcome is. And I think that's the magic. I think that's going to be the true value of AI, but we're still maybe a little bit removed from that realization at scale. But we're going to need to teach those skills. We're going to need to teach students not get an AI to do a part of your job. It's going to be, how is this AI? How are you going to sit down with an AI and solve a problem that was impossible for you to solve otherwise, right? And then how are you going to go find that problem? How are you going to find something that you're so passionate about? You're going to say, I'm going to go solve the heck out of this problem because it's a great problem to solve and it's something that I believe in. I think having that courage, having that curiosity, having that creativity and critical thinking, the ability to collaborate with people, those are the skills that we've got to really emphasize in the classroom. And if we do, I think the upside of where we're headed is enormous.
Well, I appreciate that you're sort of like waxing poetic there. I think getting very aspirational, but very like grounded too, in the sense of like, these are things that you're speaking about that can be sort of nurtured and facilitated in the classroom, organizations and everything like that. Yeah, there'll be this sort of compounding and all that. But I think even just taking that balanced approach of like not just looking at AI as something that you would like offload work onto and just sort of like, automate everything or as much as possible. It's like, yeah, sure, it can do that. But I think if you're like, and what I'm always more excited about with AI is that sort of like that augmenting piece, that ability to like,
Yeah, totally.
whether it's like routine stuff, I mean, thinking in like the student context, if you get this really powerful, AI co-pilot for a student that they can just conversationally ask about the things that they need, that they're curious about or whatever, versus like, what should I ask to which person, whatever else, like, hey, you've just got your buddy there, this sort of virtual, you can just text it and, do kind of natural conversation and get access to the resources that you need, to succeed as a student, to, grow personally,
Oh yeah, it's a really
professionally,
good
to
point.
get involved. So like
Yeah.
those sort of things, that's what I think about is like this, that ability to like not feel like, so rigid in the sense, because I think at this point in sort of like the, advent of the internet and everything else is like, well, it's all there. You got to figure out how to find it and like in the right search or the right thing or whatever else. But if it's like, especially if it's a little bit contoured, if you have that sort of like kind of optimized AI co-pilot that you can just speak to naturally, that's always there and can get you like answers and resources and whatever else, like, I think it's that idea of like, that helps us reach our full potential, you know, as much or more so that I'd say I'm
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
like offloading the like routine,
Oh, 100%.
tasks and stuff like, so I think that's sort of like, well, let's kind of hold those things in equal weight or equal importance. So that was sort of like what was resonating a bit from what you're saying, and the idea that it has as much impact on that individual level of, the individual student, for example, as it would for like society or even just like a place of work that like, everybody's kind of
Yeah.
like, getting stuff solved in an efficient and effective way because they've got a really good tool to be able to just kind of naturally ask questions of what they're curious about or a problem that they're facing or whatever else. I think that that can be a good way to kind of have like a North Star to kind of guide us of like how we're kind of building these tools to be as good on sort of that like agentic level as they are in sort of like the conversational problem solving, that kind of creative augment sort of piece. So
Yeah.
I really like that.
You know,
Yeah.
something you said was really cool, and it made me think about one aspect that we intentionally built into Clarity, which is really this idea that if you're using it and the chatbot is aware of the assignment, right? It knows what it is that you're trying to do. So in many ways, the student might be working on it. I never did this, but a student might be working on it at 2 a.m. I'm just kidding. I've worked on assignments at 2 a.m. all the time. And a teacher obviously is not going to get out of bed and talk to the student about the assignment and sort of help unblock them at 2 a.m. But having the proxy there, right, that's sort of working on behalf of the teacher and is also transparent to the teacher in that moment. I mean, so much growth happens in those moments where you're banging your head on against something and it's midnight and you're frustrated and then a light bulb comes on. And I think we have the opportunity to facilitate more of those. And that's what the AI assistant in Clarity does. I think and we're going to keep building on it. This is our first cut at it, right? And as we build on it, you can think about the AI assistant starting to more actively facilitate knowledge throughput between the teacher and the student as we experiment and figure out how to give it more context in a thoughtful way, both ways, right? Kind of the teacher, imagine a world where the teacher can say, hey, how are things going in my assignments? And if, obviously there's a lot of things to solve here, but, being able to say, yeah, okay, well, the students are kind of trucking along in this way. Here's some things that they're kind of working on and some things that they're maybe struggling with, some themes. Imagine a teacher being able to say, you got 3 more days before the assignment's due. I hope you're all working on it. But today, I just want to spend 15 minutes covering this topic because, I bet some of you guys are struggling with it. And just being able to be informed in that way that's very low touch, but high impact. I think AI gives us the ability to do that. So all of that are things that are certainly on our roadmap, certainly things that we're going to build toward in a thoughtful way as we learn how students and teachers are using Clarity.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff, an exciting moment, and we'll definitely be staying tuned for all those kind of new developments and stuff. And we always kind of like to wrap up and kind of tie things together. Just giving our guests the opportunity to share advice that you'd give to other higher ed leaders. Navigating this moment. Certainly, couching this more in kind of the integrating AI in a thoughtful and impactful way. But if there's just anything else, just whatever way you want to take this question, but advice you would give to other higher ed leaders navigating this moment.
You could have asked a slightly larger question. No, I'm teasing. It's such a important question. I think in this moment of enormous uncertainty for all leaders in education, especially higher ed leaders, the advice I'd give is we're on this journey that we don't know where it is that we're going, but I don't mean that in a bad way. We have a lot of agency to control that. And I think it's really important to believe that ultimately we're going to get to a place of trust and transparency, a place where AI has this incredibly important place in the classroom and in our lives and educators' lives and students' lives, but in thoughtful and impactful ways. I'm not despondent about where we are, even though I understand the uncertainty is really, really high. I think we're on this arc where it ends in a place of us being able to solve problems, create things that we couldn't before. It's going to be kind of windy to get there. And we just our North Star needs to be leaning into trust, leaning into creating more human moments. Our North Star shouldn't be, I think, immediately pushing new technologies or change away, because that's inevitable, but really saying, what is our principles, right? What is it that we're trying to actually achieve? What are things that are possible now that maybe weren't before? And I think as long as we have that sense of trust and that sense of curiosity and embrace of the fact that change is happening, but we want to do it thoughtfully, I think we're going to get to the other side in a really good place and be happy for the journey.
Yeah, those are great thoughts and advice and sentiments to end on. And like I said, we're just excited to see kind of what's next with what you're building and just sort of, having your, I think, perspective in the mix here. I really appreciate, is kind of helping to guide, how we're sort of building and integrating AI into higher education. So we'll have ways to connect with you and Turnitin Clarity specifically in the show notes and description for this episode. So just thank you so much, Eric, for hanging out and sharing all that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's a real pleasure being here, Dustin.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly in your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.